Hello, I'm David Breeden. I'm the senior minister at First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis, and this is Coffee and Wisdom in the summertime. We are coming live at 9 a.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and at other times on YouTube. You can go to the Den of Conversation and find us. This week, I'm talking about the self-abstracted, and that's really asking the question, are we minds or bodies? And the question's answer seems to be yes, both and. So I want to look a little bit about that today. Well, in the Christian world, one thing that has been part of the thinking from the beginning is the difference between the body and the mind and the body and the soul. For example, as I mentioned on Tuesday, Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5, verse 29, says this: if your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. So physical body doesn't matter so much as the afterlife and the abstracted soul type thing. In Matthew 5, verse 30, and if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to go into hell. It's all about the spirit or the soul. It's all about the afterlife, and the physical body here right now. That's a problem, and it's a problem that can be solved. Much of this idea, as I mentioned, comes from Greek philosophy, not from ancient Hebrew thinking. Aristotle said the human person is an embodied spirit. Okay, that's the way of looking at it. Again, is the physical body and the soul or spirit are two different things. But the question is never the other way around in the older Western Christian idea. That is that the physical body in some way creates the spirit or the soul, which appears to be now, with a little more advanced science, appears to be the way it actually is. So what this did in the Western Christianized world was send us on a search for how to escape the body to become spiritual. And a lot of philosophers and writers have attempted to do this. For example, the beginning of Christopher Isherwood's The Berlin Stories is this: I am a camera with its shutter open, quite passive, recording, not thinking. Well, that's not true, is it? He isn't a passive recording device. Actually, he's a human being. And of course, most of us know the Berlin Stories from a spin-off musical called Cabaret. Christopher Isherwood lived in Weimar Republic, Germany, and missed it a lot when he was forced to move away when the Nazis came to power. This is about emotion. It's about being an embodied human being, not a camera or a recording device. You don't get to do that. Roberto Unger is a Brazilian philosopher. He talks about the embodied self, and he says the embodied self is the same person who woke up to the world in a burst of visionary immediacy, who soon found that he was not the center of that world, but on the contrary, a dependent and even hapless creature, and who then discovered that he was doomed to die. Now, that sounds depressing, but Roberto is wanting us to think about the fact that we are actually human beings. We are bodies in the world, existing in that place. And when we realize our dependency on the earth, on other people, that's when we begin to awaken to our actual responsibilities as embodied human beings. Well, one of the things that has gone on in human society through time is called ascesis, and that is where we get the term ascetic, and it's the practice of severe self-discipline, typically for religious reasons. Yes, this is a wood-carved Buddha, and we can indeed see his ribs because he has starved and emaciated himself. This is part of Hindu culture, not as much part of Buddhist thinking, because the Buddha wanted to get into a middle way between these extremes. But we see asceticism coming up all through human history. And certainly the monastics of the Roman Catholic tradition were doing exactly the same thing, mistreating the body in order to purify the spirit. Now, not all ascetic things are bad, I would say. Actually, there are some great practices not to do. Meatless Mondays, you agree to give up meat on Monday to try to help the planet a little bit. Thinking green, even recycling, it's just easier to throw stuff away. So we do have a denials of self, our selfish selves that are actually good. And we do well not to forget that little fact of the matter. As I mentioned on Tuesday, Ralph Waldo Emerson really thought a lot about this, but he couldn't, in his own mind, get outside of the Western Christian idea that there is a body and there is a spirit. He said this: standing on the bare ground, my head bathed in the blithe air and uplifted into infinite space, all mean egotism vanishes. And again, that's the self. I become a transparent eyeball. I am nothing. I see all. The currents of the universal being circulate through me. I am part or parcel of God, or this overall spirit, as the way the transcendentalist saw it, the oversoul. So the idea here is he wants to get to that place where he isn't an embodied self. He isn't experiencing life through all of his experiences, but rather he is an abstracted self that is getting out of that. And this is a little illustration by Emerson when he realized this, and he wrote this in his notebook. So that's his goal, just as Isherwood's goal, he thought, was to get to a place where he was merely a camera recording a recording device without any human embodied aspects. Philosophically considered, writes Emerson, the universe is composed of nature and the soul. There's your classic dichotomy, the classic split. Strictly speaking, therefore, all that is separate from us, all which philosophy distinguishes as the not me, which he capitalizes in his journal, that is both nature and art, all other men and my own body must be ranked under this name, nature. And so we've got these two things in the universe, and the soul and the body meet for a while, but it's the soul that is eternal, going through time. This is the basic Western philosophical Christian idea. But you've probably seen some Buddha statues around. Sometimes they have hands folded in lap, in a mudra, as it's called, and sometimes they look like this. And if you look, you see that his hand is pointed toward the ground. Now, why is this Buddha statue sitting on a lotus with his hand extended toward the ground? Well, it comes from the Enlightenment story of the Buddha. Right before he finally reached the enlightenment that he was striving for, sitting under the Bodhi tree, suddenly Mara, M-A-R-I, an evil spirit of all the fleshy things of the world, come to attack him. And so suddenly he is afraid of death. He is tempted to eat, drink, and be merry, etc. And what does he do to defeat all of the forces of the material world? Well, he reaches down, touches the ground, and says, you can't bother me because I'm just earth. I am a physical part of the earth, and therefore, yeah, you can kill me if you want to, but I'm just going to disintegrate and go right back to the earth. So No problem. I am not concerned. So yes, next time you see a Buddha statue, see if the hand is touching the earth. So what do the Buddhists think, therefore, about this? One thing you can find online is a site called Lion's Roar, Buddhist Wisdom for Our Time. I think you'll enjoy looking it up, and they have some of the articles out of the print version of the magazine. The print version you can subscribe to. I want to look at a little essay in one of the volumes called What is Your Body by Norman Fisher. So what is the body in terms of Buddhist thought? Untouched by Western Christianity, right? So Norman Fisher says this: one of the deepest themes in Western philosophy, beginning with Plato, is that the world of appearance isn't real. So the job of the intellect, its spiritual assignment, was to carry us beyond this corrupt physical world to a perfected world of non-material form, purely mental or spiritual. This was seen as the task of philosophy and religion until the 20th century, when phenomenology, perhaps in part under the influence of Buddhism, which never did have a mind-body split, began to break it down. We have talked in Coffee and Wisdom in past weeks about the idea of phenomenology. It was a German philosopher, Edmund Husserl, who first came up with this idea that human experience is where we get the term lived experience. Human experience is actually coming out of the physicality of where we live, social location, etc. Again, this had not been part of Western thinking. But Fisher here is saying, but wait a minute, what is it that the Buddhists have thought about this over time? Well, in Buddhist analysis, there is no body. What there is form, rupa, some kind of illusory arising that appears to be solid and that forms a basis for experience we call physical. But in actual fact, it's just a continuous flow of momentary conscious events. Yes, all is flow in terms of Buddhist thought. One of the interesting things about this is that this is an insight that comes from about 500 before the Common Era, and we have really only come to it in the Western world through science, our understanding of how atoms at work and that kind of thing, quantum mechanics, etc. But in Buddhism, it never has been true that there is a solid body. It's just this group that happens to be here right now, and it's going to go into another form another time. And we have to accept that we are just moving through time and space as a temporary clot of dirt, but it's going to go into other forms after we die. Ask yourself, says Norman Fisher, from what perspective do you look at your body? From inside, peering out from the body's eyes, or from the outside, as if you're looking at it in a mirror? But how is it possible for the body to be external to itself? No, that can't be. The body must be contained in the experience of looking, so what you see and call my body must be something else. This is a central insight for in Buddhism, and I think one of the reasons that Buddhism has become more and more popular in the Western world, as we have realized that this old mind-body split just can't be true. There isn't a soul that can be abstracted from the body. That doesn't actually make sense because our entire consciousness exists only in that which we have experienced through the physical world. Now, that might sound depressing about the afterlife and that sort of thing, but the Buddhists don't think so, because it also means that, you know, you're eternal. You've always been here. You always will be here. You're just going to be something else a little bit later in time. So one of the things that the Buddhists want to tell you is listen to your body. It's smarter than you. Think about that. One nice Buddhist meditation is a way of visualizing this is to sit down sometime, take some deep breaths, and then try to figure out where this consciousness is coming from. Where is this thing called me, you? Where does it live? How does it exist? And where is the center of this thing that we often think is very, very important, but where is it actually? And that's a good Buddhist practice to get into. That's Coffee and Wisdom for this week at First Unitarian Society. Our monthly theme is play. Coming up this Sunday at 10:30 a.m. Central Time, you will be hearing Rev Kelly talking about play. She is going to take us to her home art studio to talk a little bit about how she does art as a spiritual practice, if you will, a way to get centered. And some of our FUS members will also be sharing some of the things that they do. Next week, I'm going to be asking another question, which is exercise is good for the, well, let's think about that. If we're thinking about this non-Western idea of the body and how central that is to our consciousness, maybe there are some other kinds of exercises we need to be doing. Could be. We'll talk about that next week. Thanks for joining me.